Scottie Barnes is a future star. He's also one of the best passers in the world, and if you don't believe it to that degree, at the very least, one of the best passers among players who are considered big men. But in some people's eyes, including his own, he's considered a point guard. I watched every single initiation possession that Scottie Barnes ran last season. In doing so, I saw a lot of his pick and rolls. I tracked every single one of them, and here's all you need to know about the number one play for point guards for point guard Scottie. Now you might say, hey, the advanced stats page on NBA.com has his percentile, has his points per possession in pick and rolls where he was 18th percentile league-wide and worse than everybody on the Raptors except for Delano Banton. That's fine. Why would I watch every possession, right? Well, the reason, those stats only capture when Barnes scored or got fouled or turned the ball over. And none of those outcomes were the most common for a Scottie Barnes pick and roll possession. How often did Scottie create an advantage for his teammate? That's not captured. How often did he gift them a layup that they didn't convert or just dropped out of their hands? That isn't captured either. And how was he defended? Were good screens set? What were they running off ball in concert with his pick and roll actions? That's what I'm looking at here. I want to get down to the brass tacks. I want to figure out what makes this thing go. So let's talk about it. So the obvious stuff is that Barnes doesn't have the typical skill set that creates big advantages in a pick and roll. He's not slim or sleek around screens, and teams don't often give him an opportunity to turn the corner because they consistently go under screens or they switch. He doesn't have the jumper to scare teams into chase, and he doesn't have the handle to manipulate defenders back into rescreens. He's a young player who succeeds at a whole bunch of things that other players who are really good at the pick and roll don't succeed at. So his success in this play won't ever define him as a player. But a lot of people say, point Scottie, and if that's the case, there has to be more success here, especially if he's going to continue being in the top half of the NBA in pick and roll frequency, which he was last season. The best part about putting Scottie in the pick and roll is that he is one of the best passers in the world. And when he has a live dribble, any cut can be rewarded and off-ball actions are more potent than usual. While he was 39th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler last year, and those are the full numbers, not NBA.com's numbers, that was because of his struggles as a scorer. The pick and roll is for scoring first and foremost, and Barnes's points per chance were .759 as a shooter and 1.032 as the passer. Scorers bend defenses, creating gaps for teammates. Opportunities are abound. However, Barnes is talented enough as a passer to need less bend from the defenses to playmake. Barnes is also a young player who still has to figure out what makes his game tick. We see this with spurts of domination on offense, and those spurts don't necessarily come when he gets the ball. Oftentimes, the Raptors will give him possessions and he'll reset the offense and move off of it. He has been passive, but when Barnes does figure out how he wants to attack in a given game, he's nigh unstoppable. The hope is that as he grows, he finds more and more counters and places of comfort to attack. In the pick and roll as a scorer, he was by far the best when rejecting screens. It only happened 43 times last year, but Barnes was able to provide a hefty scoring punch, 1.094 points per chance when rejecting screens. Players are eager to cheat to the push switch or go under on Barnes, and so naturally, as they're evacuating the driving lane to occupy another, go for it. Also, because most teams don't care about playing chase or over on Barnes, instead opting for the switches and the unders, you can get the bigs up to the level of the screen. You see what I'm getting at? An empty paint behind them, ripe for an aggressive drive. While navigating unders and switches is objectively harder for pick and roll ball handlers, there are some unique wrinkles to that style of defense, and every style of defense has something that can be exploited. While it didn't happen that often last year, Barnes will have opportunities for more of this season. I talked to an opposing NBA team scout about Barnes in the pick and roll and what their team had as far as notes on defending him. The following is a quote from him. You just switch or you go under. Either is fine. You don't worry much. If he ISOs on the switch, hopefully it's not a small on him. If it's a wing or a big, he's going to turn his back to the basket and bang around, and that's slow, and you can track that. He can score like that, but it's manageable. Off ball, just make sure you don't get back cut because he doesn't miss those passes. For the most part, though, we can just switch and he'll reset the offense. End quote. And we've seen Barnes succeed in a lot of different ways doing this. We talked about rejecting screens, but there's also his ability to get around them and snake to the middle. We've seen him get a bunch of paint touches. He's threaded the needle, two rollers, he's tossed lobs, and he's kept plays alive with his dribble. And in general, he makes passing reads that very few players at his size make. That is the appeal of putting the ball in his hands. You are mining basketball genius for all it's worth. Shots can go in or not. You can't predict for that perfectly, but you can go into the film and identify how often a guy is creating an advantage. Unfortunately, the advantage numbers aren't great. I tracked 514 pick and roll possessions with Barnes on ball, and he created 114 advantages, only 22% of the time. The lack of shooting, the lack of burst, and the lack of manipulative handle, it came up. It created a lot of difficulties, and the majority of plays didn't amount to much. One of the coolest wrinkles of running the pick and roll in concert with off-ball action is that Scottie Barnes is one of the best triggermen in the world. For example, the Raptors had a pet lob play for Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan that they ran for years and years, rip punch. For Scottie, a more sophisticated action with more moving parts built off of the same screen. Shout out to Evan Gualberto for helping me give this the proper name, but it's a rip screen into a veer screen and a screen the screener action next to this pick and roll. So rip veer STS, and it is first and foremost a lob play for OG Anunoby or Chris Boucher, but less often. The screen Scottie is coming off of is to occupy the help side, so the lob is open off of usually Van Vliet's rip screen. If the lob isn't available, Scottie's screener sets a screen for Van Vliet to come off of for an open three. The quick way to communicate all that, rip veer STS. Let me know if you recognize it in a game. This works really well because Barnes is tall and can throw really aggressive lobs. Lowry's height is why he was throwing the lobs 40 feet from the hoop and away from the defenders for rip punch, so he could put less arc on it and defenses couldn't catch up. Van Vliet has long been one of the best guard screeners in the league, and the Raptors have a lot of guys who can finish a lob in a pinch, and even in a down year, Van Vliet's gravity and shooting wasn't much of a bad outcome, especially when Barnes puts it right in the shooting pocket. If Darko wants to repurpose this play this year, maybe Grady Dick becomes the rip screener. Who knows? There are opportunities. We can also see here the Raptors running some split action with Jakob, Pascal, and Scottie, all set up with, of course, a pick and roll first. And something new under Darko is that the Raptors are much quicker getting into their secondary actions. That was something that didn't happen that much under Nurse, but here we can see that Scottie doesn't get anything out of the pick and roll, but transitions and flows into other sets where he gets a mismatch and draws a foul, setting a screen in the middle as well, kind of giving the on-ball point guard stuff. Sure, that doesn't go anywhere, then sets a screen like a big, they get a switch, and he posts up like a mash wing would and draws a foul on a smaller guard. This might surprise some people, but Christian Koloko actually set the most picks for Scottie Barnes last year at 97. Pascal, 59, Fred, 52, Jakob, 83. You can see their points per chance on screen. The Van Vliet numbers only matter now to serve as a proxy for other Scottie plus small screens at this point. Despite Van Vliet's down season, he still had a lot of shooting gravity and planted really good screens as a guard. Schroeder probably won't emulate either of those aspects of Van Vliet's game easily, but he will be able to turn some of those catch and shoot opportunities into catch and go opportunities, especially when you consider that most of the go screens are run toward an empty side. There should be a lot of driving space in these actions, especially in transitional bench lineups with more shooting. We'll see how that partnership grows, but above all else, Barnes can make the necessary reads as a passer, and if teams switch the small onto him, he can score in the mismatch. With Gary Trent Jr., he only had 23 screens for Scottie last year, and they scored 1 full point per chance. So we are deeply entrenched in the small sample size theater there, but Trent Jr. is the Raptors' best shooter, he is their best movement shooter, and the Raptors will have to go to it more often this upcoming season. We'll get more data, we'll figure out how that works. The Siakam stuff isn't particularly exciting and rarely involves a lot going on. It's just two good players in a two-man action, and a few times this season they managed to actually create a roll threat. However, it's mostly used to shed Siakam of the other team's best defender in a switch, and for him to feast on Barnes' primary defender. The numbers are great, and they can go to it in a jiffy, but it's a slow approach on offense, and other players' involvement depends on if a double gets sent, which isn't the best approach to lead with for a team that wants quicker offense that has more players involved. However, you can't turn your nose up at results. We'll see. Koloko is still dealing with respiratory issues at this point, but when he comes back, he does have a successful pick and roll partner in Scottie Barnes. The biggest motivator for success is obviously Koloko's catch radius mixed with Barnes's willingness to make aggressive passes in airspace. There's a lot of potential here, and it'll be something to watch for when both players are healthy. And then with Pirtle, the struggles are notable and a direct result of Barnes' difficulty navigating switches and unders, both of which were exacerbated by Pirtle's complete lack of shooting. Pirtle being on the floor is an objective, overwhelming positive, but spacing makes offense a lot easier, and the Raptors work out of a phone booth quite often. We will see more of this pairing though, and they have to find some counters. Rejects and snug pick and rolls were the best option that I saw, but you can't always create the defensive response you want when looking for those outcomes. The disparity between Siakam's numbers and Jakob's is a reflection of just quite simply the fact that you run the pick and roll and you can toss the ball to Siakam to score the ball, and you can't really do that with Jakob. They have to be more creative. And even if Barnes isn't good in the pick and roll yet, or this season, or in the short-term future, it still behooves the Raptors to let him run it and keep running it so that he can keep learning how defenses respond to him now and as he elevates and grows his on-ball game. I hope you enjoyed learning about Scottie's pick and roll prowess, how he's been used, and how it might work in the future. It took a long time to do this. Hand tracking stuff will always lead you to way more insights, and you'll know a lot more about what's happening. But the thing about it is it takes a super long time. This video is derived from a piece I wrote, and you can go read that piece. It'll be linked. It has a little bit more information. The most important thing is for me to ask you right now if you would subscribe at raptorsrepublic.com. The reason for the subscriptions is that it is what allows me to be a full-time podcast host, a full-time beat reporter covering the team at games and at practices, writing stories about game to game, and to be a full-time feature writer who takes really deep analytical and film dives into what's really happening for these huge pieces. It's a lot of work. There aren't a lot of people in the Toronto market or any market who do all this different type of coverage. This is only at raptorsrepublic.com. I'm joined by a host of tremendous writers. We write to the subscription. My written work is paywalled, and it's so that young writers can get a start. You look at Sportsnet, you look at The Athletic, you look at anywhere that is covering basketball in Toronto. They have people from Raptors Republic, and in some cases, the most popular voices covering the team. Raptors Republic has been able to get a lot of people started in non-traditional ways so that they don't get saddled with student debt and they don't have to do unpaid internships. And the subscription base helps Raptors Republic stay alive to pay people for their labor and help a diverse set of writers and talkers get a start in the industry. It's incredibly important, and this is what we're trying to do. We have to try and survive against the big dogs, and this is how we do it, with a subscription base. I would love if you would consider subscribing. That's my life. That's my lifeline, man. This is what I'm trying to do for a living, and I want to do it at Raptors Republic. The community support is what makes it go, and the community support is what has made it go for years and years. Anyway, more of this to come. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.